Hello, everyone. This is Kripa Anand, and welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Today, we are diving into the complexities of scaling a business within one of Canada's most heavily regulated and competitive landscapes. Success in this sector requires more than just a great product. It demands operational discipline, a technological edge, and the resilience to navigate shifting provincial rules. Today, Cannabis Express stands as the largest private cannabis retailer in New Brunswick and one of the fastest growing retail chains in North America, built on a foundation of data, disciplined site selection, and operational systems designed for scale. Joining us today is Chris Jones, founder and CEO of Cannabis Express. Chris is a recognized industry leader who has built a profitable chain of 22 retail stores across Ontario and New Brunswick. With a background in M&A and a role as a professor at George Brown College, he brings both academic and street level expertise to the table. So before further ado, let's welcome the special guest. Chris, welcome to the podcast. Such a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm a big follower of the other podcasts you do, and they're great. So I'm excited to be here.
So am I, Chris. That means a lot. Now, Chris, growth is often the goal, right? But in a regulated market, growth without a blueprint is a recipe for disaster. So let's start the conversation by understanding what breaks first when a retail business scales too fast: people, systems, or capital? And then go ahead and share the story of how you started Cannabis Express and how's the journey for you?
Well, thanks. That's a good starting question. So to go over, I guess, how I started the first business. So this is my second chain of retail stores. I had one that I sold before this.
Mhm.
So my current business, Cannabis Express, I've had this one since 2020. So it's almost 6 years now I've had this business. And we've, obviously scaled the business by opening up one store at a time. And then I guess, to get into your question, so what systems break first? It really depends on, obviously you have to have capital first, right? So,
Yeah.
making sure you have enough capital to open up, at least one store, is
Yeah.
the important thing. And then after that, you go through different important junctures. So when we went from one store to five stores to 10 to, 15 to 20, you need to bring in, obviously different people, expand the team. So one thing I've done well is, being able to, number one, find the right people to bring in, just because at the very beginning of any business, the business owner wears every hat, they do everything. And then
Yeah.
obviously the larger you get, like we have close to 100 employees now, you can't do everything yourself, right? So you have to delegate
Right.
different responsibilities. So I see systems breaking when they don't, have the SOPs in place. Like if a business scales too fast and they're not actually writing down, how to do certain things, then, if someone leaves the team, they're in, a lot of trouble, right? Just because they don't have the system
Yeah.
procedures in place. So for us, that was important, just, having standard operating procedures from day one. So that was the most important thing, just building a strong foundation of that, especially as we scale and open up more stores.
Hmm.
And then obviously, real-time data tracking across all the stores. And then, we built our infrastructure kind of ahead of the growth, where some companies try to grow first. So that was important to us, being able to, have the right systems in place and then grow
Hmm.
off of that. So for us, obviously
Yeah.
having capital first, most important thing. And then after that, just a balance between the people and just making sure the systems are in place.
That's very well articulated, a very well balanced answer. I'd love for us to, rewind a little bit. You said that this is your second venture, right? I'd love for you to, tell us listeners about what was the founder of Cannabis Express doing in life before this business. So, what was going on? How did your day in life look like before this?
So before this business, I had a chain of other cannabis retail stores. So I had that business for about a year. I opened it, sold it within a year of starting it.
Hmm.
So that business, I had about four stores. They were all early on stores under a different name, had different investors, different employees, etc. So
Uh-huh.
that was, the a great learning experience to getting into retail, because I didn't have any previous retail experience before that. And then prior to that, I worked at a large cannabis M&A company that was public, that went through several acquisitions,
Yeah.
investment, and then was acquired by a much larger one. So that experience gave me like my knowledge even today is, a mile wide and inch deep. Like I know a little bit about everything. But
Yeah,
I'm not, a deep expert in certain things. But my ability to bring the right people on is the most important. So finding, what
yeah,
skills I lack, and then just bring in people who have the same vision
yeah.
as me and can fill those buckets.
Very interesting. So, when you say, you find these people, you can fill those gaps in your life. Um, do you have a technical process that you follow, or is it more of an intuition, specifically in this type of business? Do you think you just see someone and you know that I this person can help me void that gap, or you need to stick to the technicalities and the ifs and buts? So, what's your take on that?
It's both. I think having when you bring people onto the team, obviously, some people I've met are very good at like interviewing, very good at the early on stage, but then actually,
Yeah.
doing the work and executing it is very different.
Hmm.
So, putting in a lot of time to find the right people is important, but then obviously not everyone works with, the company and the vision. So
Yeah.
that's identified, just, moving on from that person as fast as possible. So it's a mix of obviously they need to have the, some
Of
experience,
course, yeah.
background, technical ability, but then also, how you get along with them is very important,
Hmm.
especially in any early stage company. Like you're going to be doing a lot of things, there's things you're going to be doing that aren't necessarily on your job description.
Yeah.
So someone who's open to that, right? Who's open to, doing other things, learning new skills and doing things for the first time that they probably didn't expect.
Very interesting. Now, Chris, navigating Ontario is one thing, right? But being the first private retailer in New Brunswick is another challenge entirely. So I'd love for you to, explain to us what's different about scaling in Ontario versus New Brunswick, and how do you build a retail model that remains profitable while operating in completely different regulatory environments. So what does that look like? Does it mind boggle you, or is it something that comes very naturally to you?
So just so everyone knows, because not everyone will be familiar with cannabis, but obviously we're one of the most highly regulated businesses that's in operation, like cannabis, tobacco, other areas are highly regulated. So each province in Canada, similar to the US, and you look at other countries, each province has its own regulations. So in Ontario, it's open; anyone can open up a store. Obviously, the town municipality needs to opt in and say they want a store.
Yeah.
And then if you look at a place like Quebec, it's all government crown
Mm.
corporation stores. And then there's some provinces that are more of hybrid, where it's some government stores and some private stores. So I've been looking at every province in Canada since the beginning, right? Obviously, I live in Toronto, so it made the most sense to focus on Ontario. So
Mhm.
I don't have any stores in Toronto. So all the stores that were focused on small to medium sized towns, being the only store in town. So looking at places that are more, and there's one liquor store, one grocery store, one Canada Post, that those types of small places.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's why we have so many stores. And then on New Brunswick was unique because I saw them change their the way they have the stores run. So right now it's all government stores. So they have close to 30 stores, and then they opened up a process a few years ago to allow some private stores to open up in certain towns. So
Mhm.
I saw that as an opportunity where we could do well, because once you get the license in that town, you're pretty much going to be the only store in town forever. No
Mhm.
one else is going to be able to open up legally. So when I looked at other provinces, the risk was just a lot higher to expand there, because someone can open up across the street and you get into some sort of price war, and I just didn't want to get into that. It made more sense just to focus on Ontario. And then New Brunswick was unique just because of that different licensing process. So when I saw it pop up online, I applied immediately, and it's been very successful for us since then. So one of the most important reasons why we've been so successful in New Brunswick and scaling out of the province, because not every retailer is in multiple provinces, right? Usually they just focus on one area. So
Mhm.
we found someone very early on. His name is Nathan Chan, and we were very lucky to have him join the team very early on. And he was critical to our success in New Brunswick. Just being able to have someone that you trust fully in a
Yeah.
different place is the most important thing. Just because I've seen a lot of people fail where they expand to a different place and they don't have the right people set up, and obviously it's not that far of a distance. It's about a 2 hour flight from Toronto to get there, but you really need someone on the ground that you fully trust and is able to
Yeah.
execute on what your plan is.
No, definitely. I think this just reminds me that people are any organization's biggest asset, right? And if you have the right people with you by your side, you can achieve wonderful things in life. Um, that agility is, a massive competitive advantage also, Chris. It proves that one size fits all approach rarely works in Canadian retail. So thank you so much for, answering that. Now, moving ahead, we're living in an age and day of artificial intelligence, right? Every day we're waking up to new things going around in the world. Um, in a high volume retail environment, specifically pennies matter, right? You've used technology to keep the business clean. So I'd love for you to, share how did you achieve that? And also, like, majority of our listeners are also SMB owners and founders and decision makers themselves. So what would you advise them? How exactly should they incorporate technology as a small business owner into their routine workflows and, day-to-day lives?
That's a good question. So I get hounded every day by, I'm sure you get them too, like emails from different AI companies trying to sell you
Yeah.
some service, and I just, I don't really respond back to any of them. But it is very important to integrate some AI into your business. Like, it doesn't need to be complicated. I think a lot of people are just, maybe hesitant because of how complicated it is. But for us, it is very easy to add it in and save a lot of time. So for example, on a monthly or weekly basis, I add in like an Excel sheet of every single transaction across all my stores. So then I can quickly narrow down, like, is one store putting in more discounts than
Yeah.
other ones? What are the outliers? Are certain employees discounting more? Are certain hours of the day more important than other hours, like reducing hours or extending them? Like, if we have a ton of customers coming in, and sales happening. If there's, like, for example, if our store closes at 8 p.m., but we have customers coming in until 8:20, right? Do we need to extend those hours? So being able to optimize that, and then also if you have multiple people working at a store, then you can, change the working hours, the labor cost to make sure it lines up with the revenue that's coming in. So a lot of the stuff I use is pretty basic. I, have a very cheap membership for, several of those companies. I'm not going to name them, but several of them, and then I just, I ask questions, I throw in the data set, and then it gives me summaries very quick. So you don't necessarily need to, have a very expensive membership or add in too much. But it definitely is very helpful in terms of just giving you quick summaries, going through data very quick, like, gross margin by store, average basket size, like the discounting, like I mentioned, tracking inventory. So I can upload my inventory and I can see, okay, what's old. And then if it's, more than a year old, I need to put it on sale and discount it. Otherwise, it's, customers aren't going to be happy if they, are paying full price for a product that ends up being kind of stale. So it helps me dig through data sets very quickly and then write summaries. So those are the main things I'm using it for right now. But obviously, as we scale and get more stores, then it might be integrated more into the business. But there's very, easy wins that a lot of small businesses can do without having, thousands of dollars a month in some type of membership. Like, I think I spend like, I don't know, $40, $50 a month on some of these memberships, and they're very cheap. And then obviously you can cancel them whenever you want. So they have been very helpful for that for us. So I think you just need to start with, simple tasks and then, grow from there.
Wow, that is also a great reminder that you just need to be smart about a certain things, right? I think if you just use the basic tools that are available in the market without, going too deep into it, even then, I think you'll be able to figure out a lot of the things that you might not be able to do on your own. Um, and that's also what you said is a game changer for profitability, right? It proves that smart data usage is what separates a struggling shop from a profitable chain. And on that note, here's a special message for all of our listeners, especially for all the Canadian retail founders. Are you feeling the pressure of a crowded market? Learn from Chris Jones of Cannabis Express about how to scale responsibly under regulation, why real estate ownership is a hidden asset, and the secrets to using AI driven marketing to build a national brand that actually stays profitable. Now, let's get back to Chris. Chris, coming back to you. Um, every founder starts as the person doing everything, right? As the entrepreneur, they're juggling between so many hats. They're the salesperson, marketing person, right? Um, But as the business evolves, the roles they change, right? You can't be in all those places at one time. You can't be omnipresent. So I'd love for you to, share the journey of that leadership, because that is very crucial, specifically when you're growing in life and business, right? So how has your role as a leader changed from store 1 to store 22? And what specifically did you have to stop doing personally for the company to grow? This is a very tough question, and I want the answer to be as candid as possible.
Yeah, that's really important. I think I do know a lot of other business owners, and sometimes they're just too involved in everything. And obviously, at the very beginning, you're involved in everything. You're wearing every hat, hiring, sales, inventory, daily operations, etc. And then you reach different junctures where you need to bring people on. Like you need to have like a regional manager, a district manager, someone
Yeah.
in charge of all of your product ordering, inventory, everything like that. So it has changed a lot since, I had one store. Like I was more involved on the ground at the very beginning. Like I was visiting the stores more often, and I still do when I can. Obviously, I'm at every single grand opening and, at the very beginning when the store is set up, but
Hmm.
really need to be able to delegate those things to other people. Like I remember I was at an event fairly recently, and I met an owner of the store, and he had, he had one store. He had he introduced me to his like CFO, his CMO, just all these people, and I was looking at him like, you only have one store. Like I hope it's doing like 50 million in sales to have all these people, and it obviously wasn't, doing that much in sales. And he just, for us, I did it the opposite way, where I did so much myself until I reached a point where
Mm.
I just couldn't take on anymore. And then I hired someone. And then, then you grow from 5 stores to 10 stores. And then, I follow the same pattern where I only hire someone right at the or close to the last moment versus before, or other people who, they build out this big team at the very beginning, and, there's not enough work for them to do. Right. So, for us, obviously, that goes to saving money, having enough capital to open up new stores by not building our team too quickly. So that's been important. But obviously, it puts more pressure on me, the founder, having to do so much and juggle so much until it reaches that point where I need to bring someone on. But at the beginning, it's doing everything yourself and then just bringing in the right people. So my role obviously has shifted from more of an operator to like an architect of the business, and now I'm more focused on, the strategy, the capital allocations, all the finances, and then the expansion. So just looking at, new opportunities to open up stores, and then obviously overseeing everything as well. So you really need to go through this experience to figure out when the right time is to hire people. But I would recommend just not hiring, executive people too soon unless the business is actually big enough. Otherwise, you just end up, wasting a lot of money, and then that person as well in that role won't be as motivated and excited about it as.
Wow, that is a real insight and a very, practical and actionable advice. Thank you so much for that. What you said, from operator to the architecture, that is a sophisticated leadership pivot, Chris. It confirms that empowering teams is the only way to, protect your long-term expansion. Now, moving ahead, let's look at the exit strategy mindset. Building a business that others want to own. So I, said this in the introduction as well. You come from an M&A background, right? Which gives you a very unique lens on how a business should be structured from first day. So from a branding point of view, from a positioning point of view, what do you like? How exactly do you build a retail company that is attractive to buyers from day one? Is it the storytelling that goes along the way, or was it what's the secret sauce basically?
So it's multiple things. So my plan for this business obviously is to continue to build it, scale it, and then sell it eventually.
Yeah.
Obviously, I have the Ontario assets, right? 14 operational stores in New Brunswick right now. I have 7 with my 8th opening up in about 2 months, sometime the summer of 2026. So the
Hmm.
plan is to eventually sell the business, but you really need to have clean financials, like from the very beginning, like very clean financials, accessible, um, like the standard operating procedures across all stores. That's very important, because if someone's going to buy you, maybe they want to expand, right, and open up more stores. So you need to have those systems and processes in place so they can easily take it and continue to grow. And then one thing I found that's, one of the most important is, for example, like if I disappear tomorrow, what's going to happen to the business, right? I have a few friends that are looking at small businesses to buy, and it's sometimes challenging when the business is, maybe there's like 3 or 4 people in it, and the owner is just way too integral to the business. So it's tough to, continue when he or she has all those relationships and, kind of knows everything in their head, but stuff isn't written down. So
Yeah.
obviously, you need to have all the procedures, all the information written down just so you can pass it on to someone else. So that's one of the most important things when you're looking at buying a business is that, if the owner disappears, or obviously you need to have some sort of transition period to transfer over all that knowledge to the next owner. So that's one of the most important things. So that's what, the place that we're getting to right now is, being able to be in a spot where if I disappear tomorrow, the business will still continue to run. Where a lot of other small businesses, if the owner disappears, then it'd be very, very bad for them. So that's
Definitely. It just speaks for your operational excellence, right, Chris? Because it is a system that, of course, you've spent so many hours working on that, no one is seeing right now, but the hours have gone in the background. I'm loving this conversation, Chris, and definitely I'd love for you to be back. The next episode, hopefully, that we do is in studio, and we get to dive deeper into a lot other reasons and layers of why this business is important for the B2B ecosystem in Canada as well. But for now, before we let you go, if I were to ask you your success mantra, one thing that keeps you going through all the difficulties, through all the hardships in life, we all have those days, right, when we don't want to get out of bed, but we still do. So, what's that one thing that keeps Chris Jones going?
well. I guess there's different answers to that question, right? I think like personally, aside from the business, like obviously, you know, getting enough sleep, important, eating healthy, very important, exercising. Like I'm very, regimented when it comes to those things and disciplined, just having very strong discipline. So, keeping, my body strong as well as my head. So I think that's the most important thing for most founders is, obviously to be healthy just because you don't want to be burnt out, for especially considering all the hours that we work.
Hmm.
So that, health wise, that's obviously the most important thing. And then business wise, you just need to like I'm completely relentless when it comes to business growth. So if a store isn't making money, we need to figure out why it's not making money. Obviously, all of our stores are making money, and then figuring out where to, how to scale the business and where to go to next. So my main focus right now is continuing the expansion in New Brunswick. That's the main focus because the stores out there are more profitable. The operationally they're easier to run than Ontario due to a few factors, and the margins per store higher, the profitability is a lot higher, and then there's other opportunities to potentially purchase the real estate and expand the real estate out there. So just being relentless through the business stuff, and not letting things get you down. Like for me, I try to stay more kind of in the more neutral when it comes to things. Like
Hmm.
I big there's obviously big disappointments that happen throughout the day, and I try not to get too down on those because it just you need to keep moving. And then obviously on the other side, when there's big wins like opening up a new store, getting a new license, I'm not on the moon when it comes to that. I try and stay even throughout those processes so that I'm not too disappointed or too excited when those things happen. So I try to stay neutral, and then just focus on the expansion. Every year we need to keep growing.
Wow, that is one of the most balanced answers that I've heard. Chris, it was such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your insights with us.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to come back once we have more stores open. The business is even bigger. So thank you
Of
very much for
course.
today.
All right. That was an insightful conversation with Chris Jones, founder and CEO of Cannabis Express. We explored the discipline of regulated scaling, the power of retail data, and how Chris is helping shape the next generation of entrepreneurs as a professor at George Brown College. To all the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more expert insights and visit CanadianSME.ca. And lastly, a very special thank you to our partners, UPS, ADP, our HR partner, for their ongoing commitment to empowering SMBs across Canada. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Kripa Anand signing off.